Hello everyone, welcome back to Outside Xbox. Now, as you've probably seen, last night Xbox reversed its controversial policies on DRM, pre-owned, and the online check-in requirement for the Xbox One. It's also going to be region-free. So this is pretty big news. News that we also predicted, right, in our chat.
Absolutely.
At E3.
We said that they weren't going to say anything at E3, but that sooner or later they were going to, come up with some kind of climb down, and that the price wouldn't change and things like that. And that's exactly what's happened. The easy stuff to change is the software, and that's what they've changed. And so it's still going to cost more than the PS4, but it comes with Kinect, so that was always going to be a bit of a difficult one to change. It's being presented as this sort of response to like fan sort of feedback and things like that. They're saying thank you for helping us shape the sort of new console, but actually, pre-orders for PS4 were through the roof.
It's
and
a response to Sony, really, rather than...
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess people were voting with their pre-orders, and ridiculous as pre-orders are, they are the only real metric that these guys have. And apparently PS4 was just going crazy, and Xbox One wasn't. So, they want to make money. They don't want to lose this console generation before it's even begun. So they've changed things up.
Do you think it's likely that these kind of DRM requirements weren't something that Sony were planning to do in the first place as well? Do you think they changed their mind before E3, and this would have been a complete shock to Microsoft, which is why they're doing this U-turn now?
It's entirely possible they had a similar system and decided against it. Again, it's all just software stuff, so it can be changed, and I believe they were saying it's after a day one update. So presumably, Xbox Ones are already in production and have their initial sort of software loadout installed already.
It's about a day one patch.
Yeah.
To work around the.
But everyone was going to have to log in their Xbox One thing anyway on day one. So I guess it makes no difference really in a practical sense.
I mean, now that this has happened, I'm seeing a lot of people complaining that they were quite looking forward to all of the things that Xbox One's online check-in requirements were going to allow.
Are you seeing a lot of people complaining?
I'm seeing a lot of people complaining.
Really?
Yeah, I am. I'm seeing.
There's a lot of comments and kind of it's almost like there are the two sort of outraged camps, and maybe there's some crossover on the Venn diagram as well. There was a Gizmodo piece about how we've all ruined it for ourselves.
Ruined it for the future,
and we should be really ashamed of ourselves, which I think is nonsense, really, to be honest. Because none of this stuff. What you got to remember is none of this stuff's off the table for downloaded versions. If you are fully committed to our digital future, then buy all your games via download, and there is no reason why Microsoft can't offer you those same sharing things for the download version. And in a way, that's the best way to kind of incentivize people to switch their gaming habits. Offer them something rather than beating them around the head with a stick that says you must log in at this time and blah blah blah, and you must change your habits if you're a disc-based games purchaser. How about just offer people compelling reasons to buy the digital version, such as a lower price, which I'm still not convinced was ever going to be an option. Like, as long as there's disc production and people are still buying things on disc, there's no way they're going to make the Xbox Live version 10 quid cheaper. No. It's just not going to happen.
So you haven't been speaking to Cliffy B then?
Well,
he disagrees with you.
He's probably wrong in this case.
Cliffy B's quite annoyed. I think he was expecting the lack of DRM to herald a new golden age for game developers, where they make loads more money from their games and they don't have to tack on multiplayer, and studios aren't closing left and right and centre.
Right. I'm again not completely convinced by that, because the whole, as we've seen, the pre-owned thing does feed money back into the system and things like that. So it's a much more complex thing than just if you remove pre-owned, then suddenly everyone buys more games. Right. They might buy fewer games because they've got less money because they're selling fewer of their games.
Well, he was very black and white about it. He was like, you can either have pre-owned or you can have Assassin's Creed.
I suspect we'll see Assassin's Creed arriving on Xbox One.
I think we probably will.
Just as we have seen on Xbox 360. What you're going to see actually in the future is probably just more games taking advantage of the cloud. The way to combat this stuff is to have online-only features, because with online connections comes authentication. And if you can justify to the people buying the game that there is no single player because it can't work without some kind of cloud features and stuff, then they'll have to play it online. And you can feed this stuff in later down the line. If Halo 5 is a game that is required to be always online and has compelling reasons to be always online, then people will buy it, and they won't complain that they can't play it offline, because there will be a benefit to it.
Right, if it's a better experience.
Right. Instead of happening as this blanket sort of applying to all games, it's going to happen with individual games, and Microsoft is going to have to push it from the first party, and it's going to need a big title, and I think Halo will probably be it. They've talked cloud up so much that Halo 5 is going to feature cloud stuff anyway.
Popular opinion I've been seeing is that Microsoft was kind of too forward-looking with this. They're like, okay, this is a console for the digital connected future, and people aren't quite there. They're not quite ready for that yet. And so they're like, no, we want disc-based games.
It was ahead of its time.
It was
like
right.
The Dreamcast.
It's too ahead of its time. But
I want to go down that road.
I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I wanted to talk about whether this puts Microsoft back in the race, and if it puts them in the race level with Sony.
I'm not sure if it's still. I mean, they've still got the price point. Is the
well,
kind
exactly,
of the big
because
problem.
we're in this sort of like specialist hardcore gamer bubble where DRM is really important, but in the mainstream, DRM is sort of a niche techie concern, and the price point, the price on the shelf, not to get into things like importing consoles, which you can do now that it's not region locked, but for the everyday consumer, something costing £80 more on the shelf when they go to buy it this winter is an enormous.
I wonder whether we're still looking at the early adopters again. We're still at this kind of very early stage in the thing, and the guys who are spending 350 or 400 quid on a console are still, either very affluent parents buying them for kids, or they're
super engaged.
They're super engaged gamers. It's not like we're not going to see everyone who owns an Xbox 360 immediately making the switch, and we'll see price cuts and things like that as well. I think it's a long race. I think Microsoft are more in it than they were. I suspect PS4 still has something of a lead in terms of the pre-orders, but I think there's much less in it than there was before.
The tragedy of it though is that Microsoft was by many in many respects out ahead before they went and fluffed it at E3.
Oh yeah.
You've got to wonder how much money they spent developing the DRM stuff as well. I mean, that can't have been like a cheap process to get that in place.
Also, the process of the news coming out yesterday, I think the delays, and if you look at the order in which bits of news went up on the official site, Microsoft was consulting with developers, 11th hour meetings with publishers and developers, saying all that stuff we told you about DRM and protecting your interest into the next generation, we're not going to do that anymore. Are we still cool?
Yeah.
And
they have to be cool if they're releasing their games on PlayStation 4 as well.
Yes, I mean, Sony really forced their arm. There wasn't really anything they could do at that point. I mean, if you stick with that strategy that they had before, no one is pre-ordering your console. You're not going to sell any consoles, and so there's going to be no one to take advantage of this strategy.
What interests me is something like Titanfall, which is an exclusive title. So whether there were promises made to those guys, I don't know. But actually, they've said that Titanfall, certainly the Xbox One version, is going to be. It requires the cloud. It could only work with the cloud. So I wonder whether the entirety of Titanfall is online. Whether all these discussions about whether Call of Duty would ditch its single player because it's become this vestigial part of the experience. I wonder whether Titanfall is it's always online. You need to be online to play Titanfall, and if it's a big enough game, if it's a good enough game, people will play it online, and that at that point you're like, well, you're entirely protected from all this sort of these worries about piracy and things like that, and you can control things a little more.
Yeah, I think people will be less upset if it's on a game-by-game basis like that, rather than just a blanket directive.
I think that's how it will be fed in, and we'll get to a stage where all games are like that. All games use the cloud. All of them have some kind of online sort of portion, and at that point it'll be much easier for Microsoft to go, you know what, we're changing things slightly, you can now share it with 10 people, but you can't, discs are being retired.
I think that's some of the lingering mistrust around people who deeply disapproved of these measures and are now still not trusting Microsoft, having said that they're going to do away with them because Microsoft can, like you say, easily bring them back. And if they turned on a dime on this occasion, what's to stop them after you've bought your Xbox One turning on a dime again? But coming back to what you said earlier, I think definitely the right approach is more carrot and less stick.
Exactly.
And in fact, in the Newswire piece from Xbox, they do say, or they make the right noises about it being choice and the best of both worlds, and we're going to do what you want to do, which is the right noises, even if we're yet to see how play that in practice.
From Don as well. It had to be from Don Matrick after the whole buy an Xbox 360. He needed to rebuild his image somewhat in the public eye. A little bit, yeah. So it was a personal sort of letter from Don Matrick, which was.
It'll be interesting to see how it affects some of the functionality they were talking about at E3. Like they were showing off someone searching for a game in I forget what the game was. They were searching for a multiplayer game, and they were playing another game while they were searching for that. So if now you need the disc in the drive to be playing a game, I mean, you can't have two discs in the drive at the same time, so you can't be hot switching like that. Or for example, like a Blu-ray of Star Trek in there, you can't then switch to another game that would be disc based because you can only have one in a time at your disc tray.
I guess again that's another one of these sort of, it's a reason you can dress that up as a reason to buy it digitally. Game swapping works with the digital version. People will sort of realise that very quickly, that they can only have one disc in the drive at once. And if you have a primarily digital collection, you'll probably still be able to do that stuff. It's about Microsoft saying, look, there are advantages to having everything just on the hard drive, and if you want to do the disc thing, you can do that as well.
Yeah.
If you just keep adding all the benefits to the downloadable things, people will start to make the shift. It's just like I said, in our previous analysis videos, it's a consciousness shift that Microsoft has tried to force, and it's demonstrably not something you can force.
Yeah.
But if you just keep showing people the benefits, eventually they'll decide that they don't have to go out to the shop to buy a game, so they'll buy it online.
This is obviously something Microsoft's been thinking about for years, and so they're convinced of the benefits of it, but I think they've just been so bewildered by people's reaction.
And as I said before, regarding the price stuff, I don't think Kinect has proven itself to the point where the hardcore audience wants it, but you might find people are prepared to pay the 80 quid just based on loyalty to Microsoft.
Really? That's a lot of loyalty, especially at this point.
Yeah, but you're talking about people who have enormous gamer scores and collections of achievements that they want to carry over and things like that. There are people who are loyal enough to Xbox that will still pay the extra 80 quid and just go, well, I'm getting a Kinect as well. I'm
an Xbox guy, so I'm getting an Xbox.
They want kind of... whereas before it was there were just too many things stacked on top of each other, I think. And actually... Like I said, I don't know that they're necessarily level with Sony in the race, but I think they're much closer than they were before.
Still think there's no chance of them offering a SKU of it without a Kinect for $100 less?
I think it's a bridge too far, to be honest. The software stuff is relatively easy to kind of reverse. Xbox One's probably in production right now. They're probably churning out those Kinect cameras and putting them in boxes.
But it is still a separate piece to the actual console. If they really wanted it to be integral, they could have integrated it into the box, surely.
Well, that would force you to maybe balance your Xbox
true.
on top of your TV, and we've seen how heavy that thing is.
Yeah, true. But on the whole, this is a positive move.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I'm feeling much better about Xbox One than I was 24 hours ago, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Jane?
I think we'll have to see how much damage has already been done. I think there's definitely collateral. And I think the price point, we're talking about early adopters and how they're willing to pay the extra £80 just to maintain their gamer score. But I think come Christmas, you're not just looking at kind of extreme enthusiast early adopters, but you're looking at people who want to buy one of these new games consoles they've heard about for Christmas, and when they go to the shop and see 350 versus 430, I think that's an enormous difference, and I think £80 is not on balance small enough to make people stick with Xbox potentially.
Okay. So that's the big news coming out of Xbox One this week. What did you think of the announcement? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time on Outside Xbox.